Hi, in this video, I'm going to talk about the difference between processing a permanent resident application inside the US through adjustment of status or outside the US through consular processing. Hi, I'm Andrea Chev, and I'm the managing attorney at Chev Law Group in Los Angeles, California. I've been an immigration attorney for over 17 years, and I put together these videos to give you concise, easy, reliable answers to your immigration questions. If you like the video, please don't forget to subscribe, and also don't forget to hit that bell to get notified of all future videos so you don't miss any. So let's get to the answer to that question of whether you should consular process or adjust your status in the United States. But before we do that, let's define what is what. What is adjustment of status? Adjustment of status is when you're in the United States on a non-immigrant status and you want to adjust from whatever that status is to permanent residency. So you're adjusting from a non-immigrant to an immigrant while in the United States and not leaving. Consular processing is when you do it abroad. You're applying abroad to become a permanent resident. You'll file possibly one petition in the United States, or whoever's petitioned for you might file something in the United States, but your actual application to become a permanent resident is going to be done abroad at a U.S. consulate. So adjustment of status would be someone like, let's say you're in the U.S. on an O visa, and now you're going to want to become a permanent resident. You'll adjust your status from an O visa to a permanent resident. That's how adjustment of status works. So let's talk about why would I choose one over the other? Why would I choose adjusting my status in the United States versus doing consular processing abroad? Like, what should I do? And most of my clients, what I start with is, where do you want to be caught? Where do you want to be imprisoned? Do you want to be imprisoned in the United States waiting for your adjustment of status application to be done? Or do you want to have the freedom of being able to travel anywhere in the world and do whatever you want? So that's really where I start with my clients to decide which is the best option for them. The other thing you want to take in consideration is, are you in status or not? And how long, if you are not in status, how long have you been out of status to make that decision? So let's start with the travel restriction. If you file adjustment of status, you can't leave the country once you've filed until you get something called an advance parole. So once you file your application saying, I want to adjust from a non-immigrant to an immigrant, you can't leave the country unless you get permission. If you leave before that permission, then you're going to abandon your residency application and you have to start all over again. So you don't want to do that until you get advanced parole. Advanced parole is applied for and is usually granted sometimes between 4 to 5 months after application. So if you can't be caught here for 4 or 5 months waiting for that advanced parole, or maybe even longer, but maybe shorter, then you don't want to do adjustment of status. You want to do consular processing. The other thing you want to keep in consideration when you're deciding which one to do is, are you out of status? So if I'm in the country and I enter legally into the country, but for some reason or another I fell out of status, and now I'm here, but I do qualify to become a permanent resident, because let's say, for example, I married a US citizen. Then you could apply in the United States, even though you're out of status, you can apply for adjustment of status, as long as you enter the country legally and there's proof that you entered legally. Now, if I've been out of status, let's say in the country for 3 years, and then I wanted to do consular processing and I leave, there's going to be a problem, because I'm going to be barred from returning because I was out of status in the United States for so long. And that's going to cause complications with doing consular processing. So depending how long you've been out of status in the US, limits your option to only doing adjustment of status versus consular processing. One of the benefits of doing consular processing is, even though it might take longer, it doesn't limit you on travel. So if you're someone who wants to travel and not be isolated to one country, then consular processing is usually your go-to, because a lot of our business people, even if they have a valid visa in the United States to be here, they don't stay here very long. They're in and out and in and out, and they need the freedom to be able to travel wherever they want in the world during the process. So consular processing is definitely the option for them, because when it comes down to the actual interview, they'll leave the country if they happen to be here, and they'll go for their interview and then they'll return. Now, what is also a benefit of doing adjustment of status in the United States versus doing consular processing abroad is if your family's in the United States. So if your spouse and your family is living in the United States, then you probably want to do adjustment of status because you probably want to be where they are, as opposed to if your family's living abroad and you want to be with your family abroad, you probably want to do consular processing abroad as opposed to adjustment of status. In fact, it probably makes more sense to do it abroad because they're abroad. So that's also something you wanted to take in consideration, how long you're going to, or which option you're going to choose. The other thing you want to take in consideration is the length of time it might take to do adjustment of status versus consular processing. For a very long time, it was much faster to do adjustment of status. But in the last year or so, it's kind of equaled out. Both amounts of time are usually about the same, usually around a year. So that's not always a determining factor. But when you come to the decision table to decide what you want to do, you probably want to ask your attorney, what's the faster route right now? Like, what's going on in the world right now that's going to allow me to determine which one is going to be a more efficient option for me? And another thing you want to take into consideration is that sometimes you are going to have more requirements on consular processing than you would have on adjustment of status. For example, when you consular process, you're going to have to get police certificates. And you have to get different things that you wouldn't have to necessarily get when you do it in the United States. So there's a lot of pros and cons each way, and a lot of it comes down to where do you want to be for the longest period of time during the process. If you're in the United States and you're comfortable in the United States and you have plenty of time on your current status, or you have come in the United States legally and you're stuck here because you're out of status, adjustment of status is probably going to be the option for you, especially if your family is in the United States. If you're a traveler and you want the freedom of going in and out as much as you want, and your family happens to be abroad and you don't really have too much of a time constraint on it, then probably consular processing is the option for you. There's pros and cons for both, and you should sit down with your immigration professional and make sure that the attorney goes through with you your different options. But this at least gives you somewhat of a framework to kind of put on a piece of paper the pros and cons based on your particular situation, because everybody is different. Hope you enjoyed the video. Stay safe. And if you like the video, please make sure you're subscribed, because there's lots and lots more videos coming with different types of information on different immigration subjects. Have a great day and stay safe.